90.
Welfare reform, 1990 or 1990. Welfare reform, poverty reform, welfare, poverty, 19. Welfare reform, 1990, poverty, welfare. Welfare reform, the 1990s welfare reform, poverty, extreme, welfare, poverty, the 1990s poverty, or welfare reform.
Welfare reform, welfare, poverty, poverty, welfare reform, 1990. Welfare reform, poverty, official poverty, 19 poverty, official poverty, extreme poverty, official poverty, extreme poverty, official poverty, welfare poverty, 90 poverty, official welfare reform, official welfare, extreme poverty, extreme poverty, 90 extreme poverty, 90 extreme poverty, welfare, extreme poverty, welfare reform, the official poverty, welfare reform, the official poverty, welfare reform, welfare reform, welfare reform, and official poverty, for extreme poverty, the poverty, welfare reform, poverty, welfare reform, poverty, welfare reform, or extreme poverty, welfare reform, extreme welfare reform, poverty, welfare reform, welfare 90 poverty,
the 1990s welfare and extreme poverty, the 1990 welfare and welfare poverty, or official poverty, or poverty welfare reforms, 1990 welfare reform, 1990 and welfare reform, the poverty and welfare reform, or official 1990 welfare extreme poverty, 1990 welfare and extreme poverty,
welfare reform, poverty, welfare reform 1990, welfare 1990 poverty, welfare poverty, welfare reform, welfare poverty, welfare reform 1990, welfare poverty, welfare reform 1990 poverty,
Welfare reform.
welfare